In this video, I'm gonna give you 35 quick pro tips for the Vyond nerds out there. These are tips that I share in my Vyond Pro course, so here, you get them for free. After you've watched this video, you'll have a lot of new ideas and insights you can use to lift your Vyond and animation game. First tip is to develop that critical eye. You have to be able to spot when a logo is too big, for example, when it lacks margin around the edges. Make the logo smaller. You also have to be able to spot when the color is off. If something is too saturated, if the contrast between a prop and a background is too low, you have to be able to see when the color is in balance. You also want that critical eye for when the synchronization between voiceover and visuals is off. It can't be off. It has to be synced 100%. When something is set, it has to be shown. You also have to be able to spot when an imported prop looks like. You can't import props of low quality, of low resolution, and oftentimes it's better to create your prop inside Vyond instead of importing it. Developing a critical eye is also about bad fonts. Don't use the standard fonts. Use another font that's already in the library, or even better, if you have a high enough plan, you can import custom fonts, and those will be even more professional than all the other Vyond users that use the standard fonts. And last but not least, you need that critical eye to be able to see when proportion is off. That painting on the wall, does it fit with the computer screen? Is it realistic that the head is twice as big as the computer screen? Is there something about the angle there that's off? Take a step back, think of this as a realistic cinematic shot. Is everything in balance? Next category of tips is about the tweaks you can do to a video to lift it just a little bit with some simple tricks. First thing is about camera movement. You can almost always add camera movement to your scenes, and just a little bit of a zoom in or a little bit of a pan across can really lift the professional feel of any scene. Next thing is about color. Again, I'm obsessed with color, but it's because it means so much. So before you hit export on your video, go through all the scenes and make sure that all the background colors are the right brand colors and that you've kind of toned down everything that isn't the main focus of the scene. That is all about tweaking the colors just a little bit. And a super low-hanging fruit is whenever you have text, could you turn that text into a visual? Could you turn that word into an icon? Whenever you can show something instead of writing it like on a slideshow or something, you want to show it instead of just say it or write it. Turn text into visuals. A lot of instructional designers and e-learning developers work with conversations, dialogues in Vyond, and there are some things you can do to your conversational scenes that will lift the quality. First of all, it's a really good idea to split your dialogue scenes up into a lot of scenes. In that way, you can add mid-sentence reactions. For example, if I say one very long sentence and there is some kind of information in the middle of that sentence, you want the counterpart to be able to react to that word in the middle of the sentence. So you don't wait with the reaction until the whole sentence is over with. The way you do that is to add a lot of scenes, so there's room to change the facial expression once every 3 seconds while the monologue is ongoing. Another cool way to make your dialogue or conversational scenes even more cool is to create this cinematic cropping. So instead of showing the whole scene all the time, crop in on the face, crop in on the upper torso. Think cinematically, if that's a word, in the way that you crop your scenes to make it even more engaging and to make the whole thing come a little closer to the viewer instead of it being full screen all the time. The most popular segments in my Vyond Pro course are the creative hacks. This is, for example, about importing custom or imported external backgrounds from, for example, FreePic into Vyond and using those custom backgrounds to layer your Vyond assets, your Vyond characters on top of. Another creative hack is to use shapes to kind of layer on top of props. For example, if you have a fruit in a tree, you don't just put the fruit on the tree, but you add a shape that looks like a leaf that is layered like slightly on top of the apple, so it looks more baked into the leaves. You can also use something called crop doubles. That is when you double an asset and layer it on top, and then you crop away half of it. Now that you have these two layers of the full asset and the half asset, you can put something in between. For example, if you have a bag or a folder, if you do this with the crop doubles, you can add in a piece of paper inside the sleeve or inside the bag. You couldn't do that if you just had the prop. Then the paper would be in front of or behind. If you create like where it's two layers, you would be able to slide something down in between if you copy paste the prop and crop away a little bit of it. Cool little trick. A last tip in this section is about how to make props talk. An apple, a teddy bear. How do I add a mouth that lip syncs to the voiceover? Well, you have to go into the character creator, remove everything but the mouth, and use that character mouth, layer that on top of a prop, and then sync or kind of connect the voiceover to the mouth, and the mouth will talk, and you can put that on any asset, really. I'm a huge fan of minimalism, also digital minimalism. So if you're new to Vyond, not necessarily new, if you are pro at Vyond too, you can think in terms of minimalism when you create your scene designs. Try to remove as much as possible, only leave the assets and the props that are necessary and important to convey the message in your scene. Delete everything else, start from a place of extreme minimalism, and then add things in instead of adding a bunch of stuff and having to clean that up. You can also have a minimalistic approach to your motion paths, your zooms. Be deliberate whether this is a subtle zoom that is just like a cinematic thing, or a harsh zoom as an effect where you go from full screen into some kind of a computer screen, and then that changes. That's a scene transition where you use the camera movement to create those. You have to be deliberate in your choices about using something in a minimal, subtle way, or you use it as an effect, a transition. Keyboard shortcuts are essential. I have a friend who's an Excel nerd. He says that if you're a true pro Excel user, you never touch the mouse. That's a little extreme in Vyond. You probably have to touch the mouse once in a while, but try to do it as little as possible. Keyboard shortcuts not only speed up your workflow, it also opens up functionality. You can do things that you can't do with the mouse. You can reach things, alter things you can't touch with the mouse. And this both applies to the canvas and the timeline. You can use keyboard shortcuts in both places. And if you're a Mac and a PC user, you have to switch the command key with control key and the function key with the alt key. But you can see those in the help article. If you just search the help article for shortcuts, you can see all of them. Spend 10 minutes on learning them all and use them. Timeline management is probably a term that I invented, but nonetheless, it's very important for your workflow, first and foremost, to speed up the productivity in Vyond. And the way you do that is to have a clear overview of when the enter effects in each scene come in. And I know it's pretty messy when you add a Vyond templates. The enter effects in the timeline are scattered all over the place. You need to arrange them as a staircase or a ladder that goes from top left to bottom right. Then you can overview everything and understand when things come in. A cool way to get a more clean timeline is also to group things together. So if you have a rectangle with an icon on top, and those two things is really just one thing, group them together and add that pop effect as a group instead of two pop effects that happen simultaneously. Because if you group things together and add the pop effect, you'll have fewer things in the timeline and it'll be easier for you to overview what happens. If you know me, you also know that I have 3 scene types. And the first one is environments. This is where you have dialogues, conversations, scenario-based learning with characters in some kind of space. The second one is conceptual scenes. These look a little bit like PowerPoint slides, where you have, for example, a process of 3 steps. That is 3 circles connected with a line, and then 3 headers, and that's it. Colored background, something like that. And the third one is a textual scene, also just a plain colored background with a word, a term, a name, something that needs to be defined or spelled out for the viewer to understand this. You can really add a lot if you're able to alternate between conceptual scenes, environment scenes, and textual scenes in a meaningful way when it fits to the voiceover, because it switches things up. It becomes visually engaging for the viewer that something different happens all the time. This next little section of tips is about audio, and we start with music. Background music is sticky business. I think you need more than one music track for an explainer video, especially if you have a structure that starts off with a kind of outlining the problem and then talking about the solution, a sad world and a better world. Then you need a sad track and a positive track. And those are 2 different tracks often. So if you're a Vyond Pro, you use not 1, but 2, 3, maybe even 4 tracks to mark the transition from something to something else. Can also be from general talk to telling a story. You can mark that transition right there by switching the music track from one to another. Try to import your own custom music from some databases to stand out a little bit and have more to choose from. You also want to land your music. Don't just split it at the end and make it fade out when the video is done. You want to go to all the way to the end of the music track, cut that out, and put that end of the composition at the end of your video and kind of transition seamlessly between the main music track to your little ending here, the outro of the music. You want to listen for those endings of the entire music track. Maybe that's 8-10 minutes out your timeline. You want to go all the way out there, cut out the end, and bring it back to when your video actually ends. That will really land the music in a beautiful way, and also the entire video. There's also a certain hierarchy between these three layers of music: voiceover, sound effects, and music. And that is voiceover, sound effect, and music. So the top priority is your voiceover, 100% of original volume. Then the sound effects, a more subtle layer, maybe turn those down to about 30% of original volume. And the music track is just there to add a little bit of a feel, a little bit of a background. You want to turn those all the way down to about 5 or 6% of their original volume. When you've found those sound effects you like and you have a bunch of music you like, reuse those top picks, those favorites of yours. Upload them all to Vyond and reuse them again and again so you don't have to find that slide effect or that pop effect every time you make a new video. I have a bunch of my top picks, but those are downloaded inside the Vyond Pro course. Sorry. And last but not least, how can you take a video that's good and just with some small tweaks, push it up to being great? The first thing is about camera movements. You can almost always apply camera movement to your scenes. I'd say textual scenes are the hardest ones where it doesn't really work always, but in environments and conceptual scenes, you can almost always add just a little bit of a zoom or a little bit of a pan across to make it feel a little more cinematic. I've said this before, I'm gonna say it again, use fewer colors. Just go through your video and see, okay, that weird purple, is that really part of any other scene? Is it part of our brain guide? Maybe tone down the number of colors so that purple just goes out the video completely, and every time there is something that should have been purple, you make it your blue instead. That really just takes down the complexity and the visual overload of your video. A tip that hurts is to cut it till it bleeds. Take away that wall clock. Remove that chair, remove those props, those assets that don't really play a role in your scene. If they don't add anything and they just disturb, they make it confusing to the viewer. Where is the visual focus here? Just remove it, delete it until there's nothing left but what's primary. And then I'm gonna say, if you really want to raise the quality of your videos, pay a little more for those voiceover artists. If you choose the expensive options, you will get high-end results out of that. And the voiceover plays a huge role in any explainer video or animated video, so pay a little more for your voiceovers. Also, pay for your sound effects. Get a really good kind of a pack of sound effects and find those 10% that you use over and over again. And use sound effects to create that subtle layer. It really increases the kind of perceived value and kind of a professionalism of an explainer video if there are subtle sound effects. And then import your music. Don't use the Vyond tracks. Find something in YouTube's audio library, Wistia's free sound collection, or something like Epidemic Sound or Artlist, all these platforms that offer you amazing music that you can use to stand out with something unique instead of just using those stock tracks all the time. I try to do everything I've tipped you, everything I've recommended in this video, and that was probably also the reason why I just did a explainer video and I got $5,500 for it, and that's a lot more than the average Vyond freelancer. And the reason why is because I apply principles from the graphic design world, from what do I know, the cinematic world, a lot of different aspects from other areas than just animation or Vyond to my videos. And when you make this whole thing come together and you're able to show that you can do this over and over again, you get contacted by people who are ready to pay the price for that professional feel, that those last 5% that really makes their videos stand out and feel like something else than if they paid $100 for it. If you want even more tips, you want step-by-step walkthroughs of everything I've talked about in this video, and you want concrete examples of everything, I recommend taking my Vyond Pro course. I think it's great. I try to make it fun. You can find it at ruudries.com/store. Thanks for watching.